Madame Adeshawa stood behind the counter, her sharp eyes fixed on Laura the moment she entered. "Back so soon?" she asked, her voice like velvet draped over steel. Laura swallowed, her heart racing. I need to ask you something about the hair." Madame Adeshawa's smile was cold, her gaze never leaving Laura's face. "Of course. What would you like to know?" Laura stepped closer, her palms sweating. "Where does it come from?" "The hair, who did it belong to?" For a moment, the room seemed to grow colder, and Madame Adeshawa's expression flickered, as though a mask had momentarily slipped. She folded her hands in front of her, her eyes narrowing. "The hair is imported, as I told you," Madame Adeshawa said slowly, her tone measured. "It's taken from women who sell it willingly." Laura shook her head. "I don't believe that. Ever since I got this weave, strange things have been happening. I keep hearing a voice. A woman's voice. She says, 'It's mine.'" "What is she talking about?" Madame Adeshawa's lips thinned. For the first time, Lara saw something in her eyes that looked like fear. "You shouldn't be hearing anything," Madame Adeshawa said quietly. "You must be mistaken." "I'm not mistaken," Lara insisted. "I want to know the truth. Where did this hair come from?" There was a long silence, and then, finally, Madame Adeshawa sighed. She glanced around the store, as if checking to make sure they were alone. Then she beckoned Lara closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The hair," she said, "is taken from the dead." Lara's blood ran cold. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Madame Adeshawa's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Not all of it, of course. Most of the hair is from living women, like I said. But sometimes, there are certain pieces that are special. Hair taken from women who died young, who still had so much beauty left in them. Their hair retains some of that beauty, some of that life. That's why it feels so powerful." Laura took a step back, her stomach churning. "You mean this hair?" "Yes," Madame Adeshawa said softly. "It belonged to a woman who died tragically. She was beautiful, but her life was cut short. And now, her spirit lingers, attached to the hair she once wore." Lara's hands flew to her head, touching the weave with trembling fingers. "You sold me haunted hair." Madame Adeshawa didn't flinch. "It's not haunted, per se. But the spirit of the woman is still connected to it. Sometimes, they try to communicate with the person who wears their hair. It's rare, but it happens." Lara's heart was pounding in her chest. "You need to take it back. I can't wear this anymore." Madame Adeshawa's expression hardened. "I can't take it back. You purchased it, and now it's yours. Removing it won't make a difference. The spirit is already bound to you." Lara felt the room spinning. She couldn't breathe. "What do I do? How do I get rid of it?" Madame Adeshawa's eyes darkened. "There is only one way. You must find out what the spirit wants. Until then, the hair and the spirit will remain with you." Laura stumbled out of the store, her mind racing. The dead. The hair belonged to the dead. It was too much to process. She had to find out what the spirit wanted, but how? The voice in her head had been growing louder, but it didn't tell her what it wanted, just that it was hers. As she hurried down the street, the whispers began again, louder than ever.
"It's mine. Give it back."
Laura clutched her head, her fingers digging into her scalp as the cold sensation spread across her body. She had to find out what the spirit wanted, before it was too late. Lara barely made it home before collapsing onto her bed, her mind spinning. How had she gotten herself into this mess? Haunted hair. A spirit bound to her. It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a bad Nollywood film. Yet the cold in her scalp and the voice in her mind were very real. The night pressed in around her, the darkness of her room seeming thicker than usual. Lara sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the weave on her scalp. The strands felt like ice against her skin. She glanced at the mirror, her reflection blurred in the dim light. The shadowy figure that had begun to haunt her in the mirror was back again, her face twisted in anger.
It's mine.
The voice hissed, louder than ever before.
Give it back.
Laura jumped up from the bed, her heart racing. What do you want from me? She cried into the empty room. I don't even know you. But the voice didn't answer her question. It only repeated the same command, over and over again. It's mine. Give it back. Laura stumbled back toward the mirror, her hands shaking. Her reflection shifted again, her eyes taking on a vacant, haunted look that sent a shiver down her spine. For the first time, Lara could see it clearly, this wasn't just a figment of her imagination. Something, or someone, was staring back at her from the other side of the glass. And then, in a flash, she understood. The woman, whoever she had been, wanted her life back. She had died young, with her beauty intact, but her soul hadn't moved on. It was trapped, tethered to the weave, to the strands of hair that Laura now wore. And as long as Laura wore it, the woman's soul would haunt her. The spirit wanted restitution. That night, Lara slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by fragmented images of a woman's face, contorted in pain and anger. The voice didn't let up, even in her sleep, echoing in her mind like a broken record. By morning, Lara was exhausted, her nerves frayed. She couldn't keep going like this. She had to confront the spirit, to figure out what it wanted, and how to give it back. She reached for her phone and dialed Titi's number. Titi, Lara said, her voice thick with fatigue. I need your help. Titi, sensing the desperation in her friend's tone, agreed to meet her at Lara's apartment later that day. When she arrived, her usual carefree demeanor vanished as soon as she saw the state Lara was in. Lara looked pale, her skin drawn tight over her cheekbones, her eyes red and sunken. Lara, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in days, Titi said, her voice laced with concern. Lara didn't bother with pleasantries. She grabbed Titi's hand and led her into the bedroom, pointing at the mirror. Look. Titi blinked, confused. At what? Lara shook her head. Just watch. She stood in front of the mirror, running her fingers through her hair, as she had done so many times before. The reflection in the mirror shifted again, Lara's face blurred, replaced by the ghostly image of the woman. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, her lips curled into a snarl. Titi gasped and took a step back. What the hell is that? Lara turned to her, her face drawn with fear. It's the hair, Titi. The hair is cursed. The woman who owned it before, she's dead, and she's haunting me. Titi stared at her, her mind racing to catch up. This is insane, Lara. I know, Lara said, her voice cracking. But it's real. I can feel her, I can hear her. She won't leave me alone. I need to find out what she wants, or I'll go mad. Titi paced the room, her mind racing. What do we do? Do we call a priest? A babalawo? Lara shook her head. No. I don't think they can help. I have to figure out what this woman wants. I need to give her peace. But I don't even know her name. I don't know where to start. Titi sat down on the edge of the bed, her mind whirling. After a moment, she snapped her fingers. Wait. The store. What if we go back to the salon and find out who sold the hair? Maybe they know who this woman was. Maybe they can help. Laura nodded, feeling a surge of hope. It was a long shot, but it was better than nothing. Later that evening, Laura and Titi found themselves standing in front of Ngozi's salon once again. The neon lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the street. Inside, the salon was quiet, a few women lounging in chairs as stylists worked on their hair. Ngozi looked up as they entered, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Laura. Hey, girl. You here for a touch-up? Laura shook her head, her expression serious. I need to know about the hair. Where did you get it from? Ngozi's smile faltered. The hair. Why? Is something wrong? Laura hesitated, glancing at Titi before turning back to Ngozi. I need to know who owned it before. I need to know where it came from. Ngozi looked puzzled but shrugged. I got it from my usual supplier. Madam Adeshawa, you know her. Lara's stomach turned at the mention of the name. Did she tell you anything about the hair? Where it came from? Ngozi frowned, clearly confused. No, it's imported. Like I told you before, it's high quality, virgin hair. Why are you asking? Lara took a deep breath. I think the hair is cursed. Ngozi's eyes widened. Cursed? Are you serious? Titi jumped in. She's not kidding, Ngozi. Weird stuff has been happening since she got it. We need to know everything you know. Ngozi looked from Lara to Titi, clearly unnerved by their intensity. After a long pause, she sighed. Look, I don't know much, okay? All I know is that Madam Adeshawa has some special pieces. Hair that comes from women who died young. Beautiful women. She says it makes the hair more powerful, more desirable. Lara's heart sank. So it was true. The hair was taken from the dead. How do I give it back? Laura asked, her voice trembling. How do I get rid of this curse? Ngozi shook her head. I don't know. I've never heard of anyone having problems like this. Maybe you should go back to Madam Adeshawa. She's the one who deals with the hair. Maybe she knows. With no other options, Laura and Titi headed back to Madam Adeshawa's shop, the weight of their desperation pressing down on them. As they entered, the familiar scent of perfume filled the air, but this time, it felt suffocating. Madam Adeshawa stood behind the counter, her eyes cold as she regarded them. You're back, she said, her voice laced with irritation. Lara stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. I need to return the hair. The spirit, it's haunting me. I need to give it back. Madam Adeshawa's expression didn't change. I told you before. The hair is yours now. The spirit is bound to you. Lara felt tears prick her eyes. Please. There has to be a way. I can't keep living like this. Madam Adeshawa sighed, her gaze softening slightly. There is one way, she said slowly. But it's dangerous. You must perform a ritual to release the spirit. If you fail, the spirit will claim you. Lara's blood ran cold. What kind of ritual? Madam Adeshawa stepped around the counter, her voice dropping to a whisper. You must go to the place where the woman died. Light a candle in her memory. And then, you must burn the hair. Lara's heart pounded in her chest. Could she really do it? Could she risk her life to rid herself of the spirit? But what choice did she have? The night sky stretched endlessly over the darkened road, a suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb all sound, leaving the world eerily silent. Lara clutched the small bundle of candles and matches in her trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Titi was beside her, though even her friend's presence couldn't shake the cold that had settled deep in Lara's bones. "Are you sure about this?" Titi asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "No," Lara replied truthfully. "But what choice do I have?" The two of them were headed to a remote cemetery on the outskirts of Lagos, the final resting place of the woman whose hair now clung to Lara's scalp like a death sentence. Madam Adeshawa had given them the location after some persuasion, her reluctance clear. "Do not take this lightly," she had warned them before they left. "The spirit is vengeful. You must follow the steps exactly as I told you, or it may never leave." Now, as they neared the iron gates of the cemetery, Lara's heart was racing. She had never been to a place like this before, especially not at night. The gate creaked as they pushed it open, the sound cutting through the silence like a scream. The cemetery was deserted, as one would expect at this hour, the rows of graves barely visible in the moonlight. Lara shivered as they walked deeper inside, the cold air wrapping around her like a shroud. She glanced at the paper in her hand, where the location of the grave was scrawled in shaky writing. The woman's name had been forgotten by time, but her grave remained marked, according to Madam Adeshawa, with an old headstone near a tree at the edge of the cemetery. "There it is," Titi said, pointing to a crumbling headstone under a large, gnarled tree. Lara's stomach twisted. The grave looked ancient, the name barely legible. This was where it all ended, or where it all began, depending on how the ritual went. "Let's get this over with," Lara muttered, setting down the candles in a circle around the grave. Her fingers fumbled with the matches, but she managed to light the candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows over the tombstone. Titi stood back, watching as Lara pulled a lock of the hair from her head. Her scalp tingled as she touched it, the cold sensation spreading down her spine. The hair was as smooth and glossy as it had been the day she bought it, but now, knowing what it was, it felt like a snake coiling around her fingers. "Burn it," Titi whispered, her eyes wide. Lara hesitated. The whispering voice that had haunted her for weeks was louder now, almost deafening.
"It's mine. Don't burn it."
Lara closed her eyes, willing herself to ignore it. She had come this far. There was no turning back. With a quick motion, she held the lock of hair over one of the candle flames. The fire licked at the strands, and they ignited with a soft crackle. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The wind picked up, swirling around them, blowing out the candles. Titi screamed, but Lara couldn't move. She watched, frozen, as the hair burned, the smoke rising into the air like a dark cloud. And then, from the shadows, the figure of the woman appeared. Her face was pale and hollow, her eyes filled with rage. She stepped forward, her feet not touching the ground, her hair flowing behind her like a storm.
"It's mine."
The woman hissed, her voice echoing in the night.
"You took it. You must pay."
Lara's heart pounded in her chest, her throat dry with terror. She stumbled back, falling to the ground, the cold earth pressing against her skin. The woman loomed over her, her skeletal fingers reaching out, her face twisted in anger. "No!" Lara cried, scrambling to her feet. "I didn't take it. I didn't know. Please, let me go." The woman's fingers brushed Lara's arm, and the cold that followed was like death itself. But then, something shifted in the air. The rage in the woman's eyes faltered, replaced by something else, sadness. She paused, her hand hovering just inches from Lara's skin.
"You must give me peace."
The woman whispered, her voice softer now, almost pleading.
I never had a chance. I was robbed of my life.
Lara's breath caught in her throat. How? How can I give you peace? The woman's form flickered, her voice barely audible now.
Remember me. My beauty was all I had, and now I am forgotten.
Her pulse slowing as the terror in her chest was replaced by a deep sadness. She understood now. The woman had been beautiful, young, but her life had been cut short, and she had been forgotten. Her hair was all that remained, a token of a life that had been taken too soon. Laura knelt before the grave, her hands trembling. I remember you, she whispered. I won't forget you. Your beauty, your life, it mattered. You are not forgotten. For a moment, the wind stopped, the night stealing around them. The woman's form flickered one last time before fading into the darkness, her voice a whisper on the wind. Thank you. The cold in Lara's scalp lifted, the weight that had pressed on her for weeks disappearing with it. She let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face. Titi rushed forward, pulling her into a tight hug. Is it over? She asked, her voice shaky. Laura nodded, her body trembling with relief. It's over. The next morning, Lara woke up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The air in her apartment seemed brighter, the oppressive presence that had haunted her now gone. She ran her fingers through her hair, feeling only warmth. As she dressed for the day, she glanced at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time since this ordeal had begun, she saw herself, not a shadow of another woman's pain. The lesson, Lara realized, wasn't just about beauty or vanity. It was about memory, about the power we give to things, and the way we forget the lives that have been lost. The woman who had haunted her had wanted nothing more than to be remembered, to have her existence acknowledged. Lara would carry that with her forever, a reminder that beneath the surface of beauty, there are stories we can't see, stories that deserve to be told.